May is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and we're excited to celebrate AAPI contributions to our nation's history and culture. Check out our book lists for all ages, programs, and more at queenslibrary.org. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. Teens, learn how to maintain your mental health and support your friends with activities, book lists, programs, and resources, especially for you, all month long. Learn more at queenslibrary.org. Step up to the plate and get your QPL Special Edition Mets Library card. Current QPL card holders and new card applicants can get this free card at any QPL location. Learn more at queenslibrary.org/Mets and check out our amazing array of free books and services at Queens Public Library.
Welcome to Queens Public Library's talk with filmmaker Mark Pellington, director of the films Going All the Way, The Mothman Prophecies, Arlington Road, and countless music videos, including the iconic Jeremy by Pearl Jam and One by U2. From Directors Club, Pellington deserves praise for going back to the past, making Going All the Way the film it was meant to be. It's a lovely tale of friendship, a wartime capsule showcasing two strong performances that becomes more than just another coming home story. The Chicago Reader states, The Mothman Prophecies is the scariest movie I've ever seen. NYC Movie Guru said about Arlington Road, a bold, bitter, slow-burning thriller made for critical thinkers, one of the best thrillers of the 90s. The Independent critic writes of Nostalgia, a quiet gem, equally possessing of visible scars and transparent wonders. Hi, I'm Brian Alessandro. I have written for Interview Magazine, Newsday, Pank, Huffington Post, Lambda Literary, The Gay and Lesbian Review, and have recently co-adapted Edmund White's A Boy's Own Story into a graphic novel for Top Shelf Productions. Additionally, I co-edited Fever Spores, the queer reclamation of William S. Burroughs, an anthology of essays and interviews about Burroughs for Rebel Satori Press. I'm also the co-founder and editor-in-chief of the literary journal, The New Engagement. My first novel, The Unmentionable Mom, was published in 2015 by Cairn Press. My first feature film, Afghan Hound, was produced by Marriott Media in 2011 and is streaming on Plex, Tubi, and Amazon. My new novel, Performer Non Grata, was released in April by Rebel Satori Press. Culture Connection, curated by Daniel Zaleski and now in its 10th year at the Queens Public Library, is proud to present international artists from emerging talent to award-winning masters. These disciplines include music, theater, author talks, and film. Now expanding into a virtual format, Culture Connection is currently reaching a global audience. Mark Pellington is a music video pioneer and filmmaker. He has been directing music videos since the mid to late 1980s and is responsible for such iconic videos as Jeremy by Pearl Jam, One by U2, Dance Me to the End of Love by Leonard Cohen, Beautiful Girl by INXS, as well as videos by Bon Jovi, Demi Lovato, Bruce Springsteen, and a U2 documentary about their album Achtung Baby. He has directed such feature films as Going All the Way with Ben Affleck and Rose McGowan, Arlington Road with Jeff Bridges and Tim Robbins, The Mothman Prophecies with Richard Gere, The Last Word with Shirley MacLaine and Amanda Seyfried, and Nostalgia with Ellen Burstyn. Mark, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, and I loved all of your credits. I didn't know you're a Burroughs fan.
Big Burroughs fan. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll have to send you a copy of the book.
Please do. Yes.
Absolutely. So, Mark, Going All the Way was made in 1997. It was your first feature film, right? You had segued from directing music videos for about 12 years before that. What first inspired you to make it your debut feature, and had you read the novel before signing on to do it?
Yes, I read the novel probably starting at the age of 15. Wow. So in 1977, I'm in my father's den, and I look on the bookshelf, and he was a Book of the Month Club member. Maybe my mother was, and I see this book, the spine. It says "Going All the Way." Well, I'm like, that sounds risque. What is that? And I pick it up and I start reading, and immediately kind of got sucked in. The same way I'd gotten sucked into Catcher in the Rye,
Sure.
and in a different way, A Separate Piece, or any of those very interior novelistic kind of pieces.
Yes.
So I read the book and read the book again, and was very kind of caught up in feeling like I was both characters, both central characters. It's a story of two guys coming home from the Korean War in 1954 who are coming to terms with their mothers, their future, repression of the era, et cetera, et cetera. So I related both to the internal kind of wannabe creative artist, photographer, Sonny Burns, played by Jeremy Davies in the movie,
Yes.
and the more affable, yearning, earnest jock, played by Gunnar Castleman. My father, played by Ben Affleck.
Right.
So my father had been a pro football player. I was a jock, but also, so I related to both characters. The book was a bestseller in the 70s. It was called The Catcher in the Rye of the Midwest. And Dan Wakefield had been encouraged to write the book by his good friend Joan Didion. Wakefield was a pioneer in the new journalism in the 50s and 60s, with Gay Talese and Norman Mailer and all those guys.
Tom Wolfe, yeah.
Yep, this was his first book. And when the Going All the Way Blu-ray comes out, there's a long, extensive interview with Wakefield, who's now 91 years old. And, for him to come full circle from writing this book about the 50s, published in the 70s, first version of the movie made in the 90s after repeated attempts to get it made. Then we come out 25 years later and do a re-edit, putting 50 minutes of new footage, restoring more of the original, really restoring my vision of the book that I loved. So the short story is I made the movie, and you make all your first-timer mistakes, right? 140-page script, 30-day shoot. Wow. You're like, oh, my God, what do I do?
Yeah.
But there was still a lot of potential in it. And it did okay. It got released. It went to Sundance. But it was kind of like I always felt a little bit of a private failure with it. I didn't feel like it was ever as good as the book, and got pushed around a little bit by the studio and make it shorter and make it funnier and make it less dark. Well, I don't really feel like I did it justice. So COVID. So the movie came out 25 years later. It was never on streaming, never on cable. And COVID came, and I found an old tape that was an editor's assembly, a Betacam tape of the editor's assembly of the 3.5 hour assembly of the film. Basically, every scene I shot that the editor had done his first pass on as an editor, laid it out. It was 3.5 hours long. And I said to the editor, Leo Trombetta, I said, why don't we take a look at it? So I transferred it to a drive. We looked at it, and he goes, look, I'm not doing anything, and I have an Avid at my house. Why don't I try and mess around with it? And sure enough, he did it and got it down to what is pretty much what you see now.
I was going to ask, what made you revisit it after 25 years, and specifically what has changed between the two cuts? You said the studio put pressure on you in 97 to make it lighter and shorter, and you took a lot of the sort of weight and a lot of the, I guess, gravity and mood or darkness out of it. Do you feel like it's been fully restored to your original intention now, 25 years later?
Yeah, and it's not even all mood. There was a huge, I don't want to ruin it for people, because you can watch both versions on Amazon, right? You can watch both the original and the director's edit. And the original version basically took an entire 35-minute subplot of Ben Affleck's character growing a beard, going off with, in this anti-Semitic time, it was this whole subplot that had been yanked out, and much of the third act. And it was filled with a little more of hormonal, like skirt chasing, drinking, a little more of like, hey, let's make a little more rowdies. I always said it was like, it went from being more Porky's to more American Graffiti. Now, it was never quite as base or dumb as Porky's, but it was a little less obvious, and I felt the completion of the book, the 3-act structure of the book, and all the acts of the book are now more complete. So I was able to restore 50 minutes of footage, take 20 minutes out of the cut, and take out stuff that was repetitive or a little bit tonally insignificant, and restore it with a big subplot in the 3rd act where the friendship between the 2 characters was really able to shine forth.
I'm so curious. Dan Wakefield, has he seen both cuts of the film now?
Yes.
Has he given you feedback?
Well, this is beautiful. Number one, the movie had been optioned 4 times. The script had been optioned 4 times. The book had been optioned 4 times before we got it made, right? Mm-hmm. People tried to make it in the 80s and early 90s, and nobody could do it, right? So when we got it made, Dan Wakefield loved every version of every edit we ever did because it's his book. He's like, I love it. Oh, I love it. You put that scene back in. I love it.
That's great.
So over time, but when Dan saw the new version, he cried. He said, this is the version of the book.
Wow.
And the most beautiful thing is he got to see it before he lost his eyesight. He had bad it wasn't a retinal thing. It was
a cataract or
glaucoma? bad cataracts. Yeah. He lost his sight. So he was able to see it before he lost his eyesight. And he loved it. He just absolutely loved it.
That is beautiful. That's very moving. The book, as you said, it takes place in the 1950s. It deals in part with the Korean War or coming home from the Korean War. It's about veterans questioning themselves and the world and their lives upon returning. So much of it is about, I think, disillusionment and even an identity crises of some sort, or a process of self-discovery. Did you draw on your own experiences from when you were that age, that same age? Obviously, you weren't the same age as the characters in the 50s, but when you were the same age as the characters, did you draw from any personal experiences?
I mean, I read it when I was 15. Mm-hmm. I made the movie when I was 34, right? Mm. So I knew that book, like I had read it 100 times. So I was both those guys.
Right, you're saying
so
that's great.
I didn't even have to, it was part of me. That fiction was part of me. And I had seen it in my mind 100 times before we started shooting. And you go shoot in Indianapolis and you're like, there's a period car. And you're like, oh my God. Like, I was like, geez, look at the car and look at them in their 50s clothes. I was like, yeah, you're doing the movie.
It's coming alive. Yeah. I think that's the powerful, special thing about great literature, especially novels, that we discover, especially when we're younger, that stay with us throughout our life. And then if you're a filmmaker, you have this opportunity to bring it to life on another level, to share with the world your personal interpretation of the book on some level, which is a great gift and luxury.
The last screening we did a bunch of screenings in New York, and it played at the Quad and in LA and a couple of other little cities. But the last screening we did was in Indianapolis, Wakefield's hometown, packed theater.
Wow.
There was barely a human being in that theater that was under the age of 65.
That's great.
Right? It was all people who had lived through that time.
Sure.
And they knew it inside out.
Wow.
And, I've got lots of scripts that I've written that I see so clearly that unfortunately they won't all get made. They won't get made. I'll be lucky if I can make, God willing, 3 or 4 of them, right? But they become these kind of embedded ghosts, and they become these imprints in your brain.
Yeah.
And you see them. I see every image. I hear it. I see it. I feel it. And this book, imagine those feelings on scripts you've written times 100, because especially such an internal book as that, where you've really had to do the work and put yourself in each character. I remember I'd read the book and be like, from Gunner's point of view, then Sonny's point of view, then kind of as a rollicking, my college fraternity days. I'd read it on that level.
Mhm.
And so each time as I got older, I'd see more wisdom, see, Dan Wakefield's genius for both being entertaining and also enlightening, profound, as well as just, slapstick. It was like a real range of
Sure,
feelings.
sure. You said that you identify with both Gunnar and Sonny, and they have such an intriguing friendship. I was really struck by Sonny's outrage that Gunnar held these sort of radical opinions, as he thought he should have been the sort of radical one fighting the Gunnars of the world, as he says in the film. But he also seeks his approval on some level. He looks up to him. He idealizes him.
Sure. I mean, they're like kind of mirrors of each other. Not mirrors, but they're like two jigsaw puzzle pieces that fit together. And
Yeah.
we, like a jock wants to be taken seriously as
Yes.
an artist. And he goes, no, like as a photographer, and he asks questions, and as a philosopher. And his assumption is that, like, oh, the loner outcast Sonny was this kind of introverted intellectual kind of standing apart from the crowd. Like, well, nobody asked him, like, what?
Yeah.
Oh, what house were you in? He goes, the rooming house.
Yeah.
So we often mythologize and romanticize the other side. Right.
I thought that was really smart about the book and really smart about the film, that it looked at this thing, this very kind of elliptical thing that a lot of writers and filmmakers don't really interrogate. And it's that thing that you just said, which is an interesting, this dynamic of two people being each other's complement on some level without realizing
great friendships, marriages, partnerships, creative alliances are all, like I've had a few of those really epic creative collaborations and partnerships with people where you can't imagine the end result without the two of us together. Like what I brought to it, what the other person brought to it, were uniformly stronger because of that union.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it creates a third thing. There's you, there's the other person, and then there's the thing you create between you, which is always fascinating to me. You sent us a bunch of photos. If we can get those up, that'd be great. Perhaps you can narrate as we go through them. By the way, first of all, this reissue, this poster is gorgeous. Can you talk to us a little bit about it first?
Well, the original poster was like 5 floating heads, and like with kind of 50s iconography of, like, there was a car and a girl, and it looked kind of like a cheesy 50s album cover. It wasn't cool. So Oscilloscope, the studio that released this, is a super cool, super artistic place.
Yep.
And so when they're like, look, we don't care about the old movie. This is the only movie we know, this one. But they wanted to kind of honor the collage aspect of the original poster, but also realize, look, you're not worried about selling 5 faces floating around on a background, which is kind of a mid-90s, like, She's All That, and movies like that, like teen comedy thing. So they presented this collage of, look at all the things that are kind of in Sonny's mind, except their first collage didn't have Sonny's face. And I just said it would be great if it was all, you understood where it was coming from.
I think it's brilliant. It's stunning.
So I thought their design team and idea people, all the way from the poster to the font to the trailers to the social media stuff to the every piece of publicity and production and marketing they did was top notch. I just loved working with them.
That's great. Now here we have the first of your Polaroids from the set, right? Talk to us about this. It's Ben Affleck.
Ben Affleck in the dark room after they go off on a photo taking binge.
That's great. I love this.
That is behind the scenes at the big dinner dance where Sonny meets his dream girl, who proves out to not be the dream girl, at a dinner dance with Rachel Weisz, and his dream girl is played by Rose McGowan.
Of course.
And that was a behind-the-scenes shot before we filmed.
The scene that follows this is so heartbreaking. That's all I'll say. This is a great shot. Jeremy and Ben.
I have both those cameras in my office, the Nikon and the Rolleiflex. And yeah, those were photographed by my friend Paul Boscheman, who was the still photographer on the shoot, shooting the stills of them shooting stills.
Oh, that's great. Very meta. Is that you?
That looks like me sitting on a floor during a rehearsal.
It's fun.
Yeah, young.
This is the great pool scene.
Pool scene, which again didn't make it in the original, and big set piece. And if you notice to the left of the frame is Nick Offerman. This was Nick Offerman's first movie.
I didn't. It's been so long since the original came out that when I was watching the director's cut last week and I saw that a young Nick Offerman was in it, I kind of shouted. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that's him.
Yeah, Nick and Jeff Bolter and Nancy Lawler, a bunch of people. They were all Chicago actors.
Yeah.
It's close to Indianapolis.
Great. Yep.
And Rachel Staying Out of the Sun.
And Rachel Weisz. Yep. A very young Rachel Weisz. And that's Ben's back.
Ben's back painting, where he's painting another painting, as Leslie Ann Warren said, in the Jewish style.
Oh, right.
She confronts him about it. This scene was in the original movie, and we took it out in the remake.
Leslie Ann Warren plays his mother, of course.
Leslie Ann Warren plays his mother.
How about this one? This is great.
Those are, I think, some of the girly magazines that Sonny had. There was 2 scenes in the original film where Sonny comes home and masturbates and fantasizes, and that hormonal go, and his mother brings him a priest to try to save him.
Yeah.
And it kind of made the mother out to be really, really manipulative.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that kind of hormonal stuff that was only briefly mentioned in the book that for whatever reason in the script became a big deal. And when we did the new version of it, we just kind of took that out. You knew that Sonny was sexually motivated, right? You knew that he was, hormonal, but we decided to make it more the action of through character with Buddy. What was wrong with Buddy? Why wasn't Buddy the answer to his dreams? So it became less image-based fantasy and more reality-based characterization.
Mark, are these reproductions or are they vintage?
Those are all vintage. It's all sitting in a box in my office.
Cool. And there's a great shot of Ben.
Ben. Yeah.
And I love this shot. This really captures their relationship.
Every movie I'd watch him in over the years, I was like, David Geffen called us about 2 months after Sundance, or 2 weeks after Sundance, and said, I tell you made Ben Affleck a star. And they hired him right after that for Pearl Harbor and gave him teeth. He had little baby teeth in our movie, and they gave him caps.
Oh, is that right? I don't think I realized that.
So I'm responsible for Ben Affleck's teeth.
and arguably his career, we could say. Has he seen the director's cut?
We sent it to him. He was really busy. He couldn't make it to the screening we had. But he had wrote a nice email, so he was very fond of the experience. But I don't know whether he ever got around with his busy life to see the cut. We sent it to him.
That's cool. So Gunnar, the Ben Affleck character, he actually becomes the free-spirited rebel that Sonny probably wishes that he could be on some level, which is unfortunate because he, as an adult, is still not the person he wishes he could be, much like he was in high school. Is that a fair assessment? There's something tragic about Sonny's character in that he never fully self-actualizes, even when he was younger, and as a young adult, he's still not quite as developed as
Sonny?
he would like. Sonny, yeah.
Sonny?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the end of the movie, you see him maybe start to take the first step towards actually being that.
I love that last shot and the last word. I won't spoil it for anyone, but it's such a beautiful last couple of seconds that you actually gasp. It's got that power to it.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's really special and
You know,
very smart.
Dan Wakefield, a few years ago, I kept on saying, Dan, we need a sequel. And he has an idea for a sequel. And I saw him in Indianapolis. I said, look, man, you better get to it. Like, write as a short story. Just write as a short story, and
Yeah,
then I can
yeah.
adapt it. But it's Gunnar and Sonny in their 50s.
Oh wow, that would be really fascinating.
Yeah, it'd be
And
great.
get Jeremy and Ben back to do it, right?
Sure, that's easy.
Just snap your fingers. So you said a couple of times, and this is very clear and obvious that the film is about friendship. What do you think it's specifically saying about friendship and maybe loyalty? Because Gunnar turns out to be very loyal in the end.
Very loyal and very loving
Yes.
and very supportive. And, you know, when you see somebody, like from the beginning of the movie all the way to the end, Gunnar sees something in Sonny that Sonny doesn't see himself. And sometimes it takes a friend to see something new that you don't see. You know, maybe at the beginning it's misguided, like, oh yeah, you were the outcast, or you were this kind of wise loner. But as he says later, he goes, you know, you have a way of seeing things, and you know how to explain photography, and you're not a rah-rah jock. You know, it's not denouncing all jocks. But I think that what he sees in Sonny, I mean, Gunnar's a really positive.
Yes. Oh. So it looks like we lost Mark, but
Okay,
we tried it. Oh, there he is. He's back.
I'm back.
Okay, great.
Gunnar's very positive.
Yes.
Gunnar's very positive, and I think he sees that in Sonny, brings out that positivism. You know,
I think so. And I think that, I think there is hope in the very end for Sonny after all. He goes through some really harrowing moments, but I think ultimately there is hope for him. So I'd like to take a look at the trailer for the director's cut of the film. Francesca, if you can run that.
Hey. Tom Castleman, class of 48.
Sure, Gunnar. Oh, yeah, hell, everybody knows you.
As he looked around his room, Sonny thought about the conversation he had with Gunnar on the train. What good, he said, was a culture built on Sunday church piety and weekday business hypocrisy.
Sonny, telephone.
You know, to me, all those years is like wasted. Being a big rod. And now, as time goes on, I'm kind of becoming more inner-directed, not giving a shit so much what the crowd thinks. You've always been kind of more of an inner-directed guy, right?
Does your new friend make it a habit of going to bars in the middle of the afternoon?
I never observed anything. I never looked at anything and questioned it, you know?
See, these aren't pictures of how people look. They're of how they feel. Wow, this is a twist. It's usually Jews who get kicked out of country clubs.
He never even had a beard until he got mixed up with your son.
I'll shave the beard, all right? Will that make everybody happy?
Happy? No!
I wish I could make you happy.
Happy you, happy.
Here she is.
When I saw you,
I knew you were the one.
the way
A year from now, I'll be gone.
Where are you going?
Well, New York, of course.
Someday you'll find the right girl and you'll settle down.
I love you, Sonny. What's the matter?
Please, just go away.
Pack.
what do you do when there's nothing else to do, you know?
All you gotta do is get the GI Bill.
You should be on Ed Sullivan.
Oh, why not?
Jeremy Davies, Ben Affleck, Amy Locane, Rachel Weisz, Rose McGowan, with Jill Clayburgh and Leslie Ann Warren. Going All the Way, the director's edit.
I guess he just got too busy raising Cain down in Greenwich Village with the rest of the communists.
I love that. That was great. And of course, the great Jill Clayburgh. Well, so you had directed music videos for 12 or 13 years, and you had worked with some very big names in music. What was it like segueing to a feature film where you're working with movie stars? And a lot of these people were already pretty famous at the time. Did it require a different mindset to work with actors as opposed to musicians? You work with actors too, I suppose, with music videos, right? But did you feel like you had to shift your perception at all?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay? I'm having a little glitch on this side, but if you can hear me. You know,
You
I've
sound
worked
great.
with a lot of like musicians and poets on a poetry series and commercials. So I felt very comfortable working with talent. But working with actors on scripted narrative, there was definitely an adjustment for me. You know, it's a lot just more controlled. Like, okay, block, rehearse the scene. But because I knew the book so well and knew the script so well, it was fun. It was bringing it to life. So my job was to, you know, support each actor, whether they were Jill Clayburgh, who'd been around forever, or Rose McGowan, who had barely been in a movie before. So,
Right.
you know, the job was to, as Cameron Crowe, as a friend of mine, said, don't be their best friend, be a benevolent father, right?
I like that. It's great
Some
advice.
people need a hug. Some people need a kick in the ass. Some people need to be, you know, pushed. Some people need to be left alone. So it's really, you know, it's like cinematic parenting.
That's pretty wise. It's very wise guidance. You directed, as I said at the top of the program, really one of the most iconic and really controversial music videos of the 90s, Pearl Jam's Jeremy in 1992. Who conceived the video? What was the process of its formation? I know that I read Eddie Vedder said it was based on 2 different true stories. Can you talk to us a little bit about the origins of Jeremy?
It was really based on one true story about a kid named Jeremy Dell who had walked into his classroom in Texas and took out a gun and took his own life. And Eddie wrote the song about the kid and was very clear in what the real narrative was. They had seen a couple of videos I had made for Public Enemy and a few more aggressive kind of, let's say, ripped from the headlines kind of pieces. And, you know, other stuff. So they thought it might be a good idea for us to work together. So they put us on the phone and Eddie told me the story about the kid and said, you know, he wasn't that concerned with the band playing instruments in it, which I said, great. And we talked a bit more about, you know, it's kind of alienation and bullying and what a kid in that headspace feels like. He shared some stuff. I shared some stuff. And then I said, all right, well, and I was taking notes. And then I just kind of immersed myself in the song, took lots of notes and started to, you know, really personalize it for me and let my subconscious go and started imagining kind of this mythical world or what would Jeremy's inner world be and what was happening on the outer world. And this conflict between, you know, rage and sadness and destruction, and kind of imagine the classroom and imagine a home life, but in a non-realistic terms, not like in a movie term, but in, you know, obviously more exaggerated, surrealistic things with overblown symbols and the parents oversized and a big pencil and a wolf. And so it kind of became a Freudian jaunt where I just poured it all out into many, many, many pages of just like, you know, I'm publishing a book next year, and it was the book designers like holy grail. And I said, I've got all the original drawings and original notes still on the postcards. And seeing them, I think that was the first video I ever made. There was actually a narrative, and there was a personal narrative. So I kind of fused that together with knowing what the real events were. So I was kind of interpreting it and wrote the treatment and just went off.
I was talking to my best friend from childhood, Chris, earlier. we're still friends. We've been friends since we were 12, since like 1989. We were about 14 or 15 years old when the video came out, and he said, you know, it left such an impression on him, the song and the video. And I think I could speak for probably my entire generation, that it really did shape, to a large extent, how we, I think, engage with music videos, how we engage with music, and how we engage with certain aesthetics. It really did create almost like a template for how we ended up perceiving a lot of what came after it. Us young, impressionable, pubescent minds. Yeah.
Well, I think the song and the video, especially the remastered, remixed, uncensored version, because it was censored for many years, because it felt like, oh wait, did he shoot the kids in the classroom? Did it have blood?
Right.
And that was a misinterpretation.
Yeah.
The blood was his brain.
Was his.
Splattered on them.
So horrible.
Because you didn't see the gun completely go in the mouth, it was linked to school shootings, and it was another Jeremy shooting, and like it was completely wrong. So the censorship created this misinterpretation and wrong version of it that made the band never do videos again. And so it was very kind of, wrongly connected to Columbine, to many other elements. And like the kids' articles have been written about it, like, the kid's arms out in this kind of like sacrificial pose, and hell, and the Hitler, it's like, it's evil. Like some of the text in it is directly lifted from the Bible, which is about, it's the origin of evil. So where was evil born in this kid? Where was the evil that he did to himself, right? The destruction was to himself. He destroyed himself.
Yes.
He destroyed the gift given to him of life. And so he took that, the greatest gift we can give, and destroyed himself. And so layering in the biblical, the symbolic, the parental, the school references in this aggressive collage, which at that time, I think the nature of the way it was edited and the text and the style of it, wasn't that different than a lot of other videos I'd made, but I'd never done a rock video before. I'd all made like hip hop and, industrial and stuff like that. So it was the first real, and also the song was huge. The band was huge. So you're catching them right at the zeitgeist. But I think in retrospect, years later, and the reason that, is everybody feels alienated. And even if you weren't bullied, you know what that kid who was bullied felt like. Everybody knows what it feels like to be maybe not connected to their parents.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows what it's like to feel that feeling inside. So I think that the character, the boy, Trevor Wilson, and the song, and he is kind of a doppelganger for Eddie on a certain level. Like, so his rage and Eddie's pain and rage and expressing the narrative, there was a real parallel. So he's telling a story. Sometimes I remember the boy, so he's telling the story of the boy. Mm-hmm. So he's the narrator, yet the subject of the story coming to life, they're intercutting. Now, this is based on the dynamics of the song are incredible. It's like a movie. It slowly builds, it rises, it dips down, builds again, dips down slowly, rises to a catharsis, and leaves you. So it's like a movie that you can just get chills at because, oh my God, you know what the ending is. You see it coming and you feel it. And every time Eddie Vedder's like, it's coming, and you see his face and the song rises, I get chills every time I see it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's 30 years. And I think everybody gets chills.
Yeah, it's lost none of its power. In fact, I think given what's happened in this country over the course of the past 30 years, with all the bullying is not new, but I think the conversation we're having about it has finally exploded to the point where it's on everybody's radar. And even though the video and the song is not about a mass shooting at his school. It's about a suicide in front of students because it was so conflated for so many years and misunderstood for so many years, and so many critics thought that it was about a school shooting. That horrible situation has also exploded across the country. Has it been brought, to your knowledge, back into the conversation at all because of that long-standing understanding?
There's articles about Jeremy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, just Google Jeremy guns. There's a New Yorker thing last year. I'll tell you what it is. It's not did he shoot him? Okay, he shoots himself versus shooting other people, right? It's the kid. It's the young white male, right? So now when these things are like, oh, that was they're cut from the same cloth. An alienated white male, enraged by issues, takes it out, right? So shooting himself. So it's that thin line. It was actually prophetic in the he shot other people. Like it's the misinterpretation was the it's the alternate version, right? So in editing it, they created an alternate version, which created actually an alternate reality, which people perhaps mimicked. So when one kid said, hey, I was influenced by Jeremy, the very corporation that played the video, that edited the video, created the alternate vision of it that influenced somebody.
Wow.
Right?
It's powerful and deeply disturbing. I mean, it's many books I think are probably being written about it, or if they haven't already, I'm sure they're underway.
There's been chapters in books about the video, but nobody's written a specific book about the entire
cultural phenomenon surrounding it.
I could write, I'm not sure it would be a book, but if you really did a deep dive, like my book next year that is coming out called The Visualist, around probably next fall. It's a huge part. It's a major part of the book. The description of it, the narrative of it, the backstory to it, the whole process of it.
No.
Because it's had that lasting impact.
Sure.
Because if it's still, what's interesting is not only just as a socio-political thing, or when somebody makes something says, I'm going to be prescient.
Of course not.
I mean,
it's out of our hands.
Arlington Road was made in the shadow of Oklahoma City, right?
Right.
So, but again, the universality of Jeremy, I mean, it harkens back to Rebel Without a Cause, to James Dean. It's alienated youth, but now if they're weaponized, right? If you made Jeremy now, like, okay, what would he do?
Yeah, it's terrifying, the prospect. Well, I mean, I look forward to the book, and maybe we'll have you back on if you want to talk about it.
Sure.
So, you just mentioned Arlington Road. That was your feature film that came out in 1999 with Tim Robbins and Jeff Bridges. For those who don't know, Bridges suspects his neighbor Robbins is a terrorist, and he becomes obsessed with spying on him to reveal his true identity and motives. It's a major departure from Going All the Way. The film also deals with paranoia, something so many people in America were feeling after Ruby Ridge and Waco and the right-wing militia movement and Oklahoma City bombing. Did these cultural anxieties inform or guide you along the way while you were making it?
Yeah, you felt it. You just the movie was designed from evil's point of view. Evil wins. So everything was a trap. Everything was a fabrication. Everything was manufactured to frame him. So everything, every article of clothing was coded it was engineered the same way they engineered to get him to drive in the garage and blow up the building.
Sure.
Some things happened to make it happen, but you had to be bulletproof in terms of so you design it from the villain's point of view. Most of it's invisible. You don't know these things, but you feel it. So you feel it, and then you get the score and the industrial
Yeah.
non-orchestral. So there's two scores in the film. There was the strings, which is the traditional score. Then we recorded everything an octave lower, and my composers, Tom and Andy, did a version that was electronic and noisy. So you're playing between the two of them all the time. You're like, this feels like a movie, but I feel really uncomfortable.
It's like consonance and dissonance, right? It's that tension between the two. I think that, I remember the first time I saw it was in the theater in '99, and I remember really appreciating how you do so much with so little with regard to building tension and then sustaining it. In 2002, there was the Mothman Prophecies. It was a very bizarre story based on John Keel's 1975 book about a reporter who investigates claims of a Mothman-like figure in West Virginia and hopes to be reunited with his dead wife as well. Like Arlington Road, it's also about obsession. The film, like the book, was based on actual events. So talk to me about obsession, and then talk to me about the fact that this was based on actual events.
Well, the irony is both movies dealt with a widower trying to figure things out, and 2 years after Mothman came out, I lost my wife, so it was very prophetic.
Gosh, sorry.
So I always like singular characters kind of on a quest, like what the hell's going on. And I was not into the X-Files or paranormal stuff at all. I was like, my father had Alzheimer's. I made a documentary about it. And when I saw my father hallucinating and talking on his hand to his 7th grade best friend who he hadn't seen in 45 years, I was like, I believe in the power of the mind, that if it says the sky is purple and there's cows raining down, their sky is purple and there's cows coming down.
Perception is reality.
You're crazy, but it's like there is no such thing as crazy. There's perception and there's reality. And if you respect it and treat it and ground it in reality and seen through the eyes of a grounded character like Richard Gere, the central question is, what did the thing that my wife saw have to do with what's going on in this town?
Right.
That's the plot. A guy goes to see what happened. All this weird shit happens, and at the end, a bridge collapses, and you not really know the answer. Right? The ambiguity of it is what is the appeal, I think, 20 years later. And when it came out, people were like, oh, it doesn't answer the question. I was like, well, there you go. So it's gray area, and it's unknown is, I think, what the appeal was. The Mothman curse and the Mothman legacy is still as strong as can be. We're making a TV version of it.
Oh, interesting. Are you writing and directing it?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Oh, that's great.
I'm working on the story with a writer named Nina Baker, and we have some good people behind it. It's taken a while to get that going, but that's very exciting because to tell that story and let it expand beyond just Point Pleasant, West Virginia is really exciting and fun.
Yeah.
And so the tale and the nonfiction book took all of these alleged incidents that really happened, kind of collected them together. But the central thing that John Keel came away with was it's all a bunch of people questioning what's real, what's not. Is there a God? Is there something that's controlling us? Like the stuff of myth and like belief systems, right? So if this person calls you and says, I know where your dead wife is, that's very unsettling.
Yes.
Or can leave you a message that something's going to happen, on the Garden State Parkway, 44 red lights. And like, what does that mean? 44 gardens will perish. So, and you get home that night and you see that the news says there's a car accident on the Garden State Parkway and 44 people died, or on exit 44, a tractor trailer burst into flames. You'd be like, holy
it's chilling.
Shit, right?
Yeah, it's chilling. Yeah.
So what it is that we live our life trying to control things. We live our life thinking we can control things and that we're in control, and we're not in control at all, right?
No, you
And
said
that
it.
once you give up that illusion of control, wow, like what happens? That's very scary.
It's
very
like
scary.
the philosophical debate between determinism and free will. It's something I'm always thinking about every day. How much free will do we really have, and how much of it is deterministic?
I think about it in like my sobriety and like that question, like Jesus, just give me the serenity to accept the things I can't change. Like just things just happen, and people have lost people, and great events have happened, and just like it's just life, right? So we're all sitting here watching this screen now, and I think it's actually, and the world has gotten so like out of control and chaotic, right? Just like, I mean, come on, who can say, you know, the world is a lot mellower and more relaxed than 25 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. So I think the appeal of streaming, right? Streaming and TV shows on streaming they let us just kind of stay home where we can be more controlled. And they let us watch shows that unfurl, that they all make sense. I can watch 8 in a row. I can control how I watch it. Oh, I like these characters, but there's going to be resolution at the end. Good, bad, or indifferent. And so like in an unresolved, chaotic world, it gives us some degree of order. And that's what stories do. They help reflect on, you know, if the world was all ordered, you'd have great rock and roll and punk rock and great reactions and very radical art that reflected the need for change. So history has said, we need to change in the 60s. We need to change. We need to change. And I'm finding that less and less in the last 10 years is like, who's trying to change things?
I think that's extremely insightful, and I think you really captured the sort of this sort of zeitgeist moment where we're sort of all, especially since the pandemic, just continually sheltering in place and losing ourselves in stories. I think we're more inclined to watch a 10-hour series lately than we are a 1.5-hour film, because there is that comfort. And we're going to be taking questions from Mark shortly, so please start sending them in. I have a few more of my own, though, Mark.
Sure.
In the past 5 years alone, you've directed, let me see if I got this right, 4 features, The Last Word, Nostalgia, Survive, and The Severing, as well as 3 short films, 4 television episodes, and 6 music videos. That's an incredible rate of productivity. How do you work so fast, and what is your process?
Well, I think maybe that's been since like 2016. Because actually the last 2 years where I made Going All the Way, we redid that, and I did this dance film, The Severing. I like to work. But those things don't pay. You know, I want to get back to making movies. Now that COVID has kind of gone away and people are getting back to work, although with the strike now, it's kind of thrown a quagmire into it.
Sure.
I don't know. I just like to work. I like to create. And I've got a lot of ideas and a lot of things. It's harder and harder to get the funding for these things, though. That's the problem.
I know. And even with your 35-year track record, the fact that you're saying it's hard is really astounding to me. Thematically, what are you most drawn to in films? I know you spoke about alienation, obsession, perception. Would you say those are your 3 commanding themes?
You mean in scripts that I read or develop?
Yeah, I think like what makes you, because making a movie as a director is an incredible undertaking. It's a huge time commitment. What is it thematically that makes you say this is the thing I need to work on, or is it different for every project?
Different for every project, and the material. If somebody said, "Okay, here's X amount of money, go make 10 movies in a row," they'd be a pretty wide range. But it's a good question. We should answer that in 5 years and see if I made some. I mean, essentially, you know, I haven't done lots of, I don't know. I made a movie called I Melt With You, which is really dark, which was universally loathed when it came out because it showed 4 affluent white men doing drugs and partying for the first half of the movie, and then the second half of the movie they all killed themselves. right? And it was an exploration of the death of the male psyche, greed and fear and ego and all the kind of things that were, in a way, they were predicting the toxic male of Me Too, right?
Sure.
So the movie in the last 5 years has really gotten a lot of like people looking at it again, or become a little more of a cult thing. So I made that movie because it could be done for $1 million, and I was so frustrated by the Hollywood system that I was like, F it, I just want to go make a movie.
Sure.
So making an independent movie about something dark, whether it's I Melt With You or nostalgia, is sometimes the very thing that like nobody wants to make, yet actors sometimes want to do.
Sure.
And
it's challenging.
Nostalgia was about objects and memory and loss and what I hold on to and what I don't. And, it was about a lot of thematic things I was interested in and I'm still interested in. The Last Word was about mortality and memory and legacy, things I've been interested in, since I did a doc on my father who I lost to Alzheimer's. So I'm definitely interested in memory and identity and objects and things like that. I'm not really into violent action movies, although I'm attached to a movie now that I hope to make, and we'll see if we can get the actor attached to it. It's called Mom, and it's a story. It's basically a female version of Taken, and it's about powerlessness, and it's about a woman whose daughter is kidnapped and sucked into like the kind of sex trafficking in Vegas, right? And she literally goes to fight to get her daughter back. So it's about love, protection, powerlessness, but at the end of the day, it's about the price of violence. We live in a violent world. No one gets out alive, right? You can't escape without some sort of repercussions. So it has the octane and the kind of fun of Taken, yet it's about something else at the end because it's told from a female point of view.
It's interesting.
So it's
compelling.
fun.
Well, I hope that gets made. We have a bunch
too.
of questions that came in for you. Thanks for a great program. Did you ever meet the owner of MTV, Sumner Redstone? We had a big program last week on Unscripted, which was the book by the two Pulitzer Prize winning journalists about the Sumner Redstone and Sumner's family. Have you ever met him since you directed?
I started reading that. It's like,
wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Nope. I met a lot of the people who are in that book, but never him.
Okay. Can you tell us what some of the funnest music videos to make were, as well as the least fun?
The funnest.
Mark Pellington tells all. Can you?
I've made maybe 3 videos that were fun or funny out of 120.
Wow.
But they're all fun. They're all fun to make. I just made one with Renee Zellweger for a song called Two Steps with a band called Texas Radio that's on now on YouTube. And I love it. It was really fun to make. Even if they're intense and emotional, I love making them. The Fray, How to Save a Life, was really beautiful because I felt like I was giving, I made that shortly after my wife passed, and I really felt like I was giving to another generation, with these young kids and kind of like little life lessons.
That's beautiful.
Fun shooting things like Alice in Chains, Rooster. You shooting a little Vietnam War scene was fun.
How long does it take to make a music video typically, Mark? Does it vary, or is it typically
I've made them from 6 hours to 6 days.
6 days is the longest. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite U2 album? Can you tell us your favorite 4 or 5 rock albums of all time?
I love Achtung Baby. I love that record. That and Boy, the first one. I think those 2 are my favorites. My favorite rock albums, and I love that you listen to rock music because no one does anymore. I love The Clash, London Calling.
Amazing album.
Changes one, Bowie's greatest Greatest Hits.
Yep. Good.
Let It Bleed by the Rolling Stones.
Mm-hmm.
Boston, first record, Boston. Rock. Fleetwood Mac, Rumors, is that rock?
Sure. Yeah, I'll say so. Rock, folk, it works. Was there a band that you wish you could have worked with on a music video that you haven't yet directed? Interesting.
Yes. I did a PSA for them, but not a video. I never got to do a video for REM. I would like to have done that, although I had met Michael Stipe and did in their heyday. I would like to have done a video for Soundgarden to complete my grunge circle. I would like to have done something for Beck.
For Beck, yeah.
But I've gotten to work with a lot of my heroes. You know, Springsteen and Bono and Eddie Vedder are pretty great. You know.
Yeah, oh my God, huge legends.
And just great people. Great people. Where both of them I talked about fathers and Alzheimer's and memory and like just, they're great souls. They're just great people.
It's great to hear that. It's very affirming to hear that they're as good people as they are musicians. Queens Public Library will be hosting a free in-person screening of the director's cut of Going All the Way on Monday, July 31st. I know that's a ways away, at 2 p.m. at the Central Library location at 89-11 Merrick Boulevard in Jamaica, New York. In the meantime, though, you can also watch both versions of Going All the Way currently on Amazon. Mark, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really had a wonderful time. We appreciate you. And thank you. Take care of everyone.